Hello, I'm Julia Peterson. I am Assistant Professor of Creativity and Innovation at Cornerstone University in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I was looking forward to doing an interactive workshop with you on how we can do design thinking for innovation in our honors programs. In the absence of our time together, I'm going to offer you this video that will introduce you to design thinking and give you some tips on how you can start using it to bring innovation to your schools. Let's get started. Let's reimagine together and see how we can use design thinking to bring innovation to our honors programs. I want to do 5 things. I want to share a little bit about our story in our program and how we use design thinking to arrive at it. Then we'll look briefly at what design thinking is and some mindsets for unlocking our creativity. Then we'll look at how we can use design thinking for honors programs, and then I'll offer some resources. Let's jump in. I teach in the Creativity and Innovation Honors Institute, also called CAI at Cornerstone University. Our program is a combination of creativity and innovation and great books. So we are doing contemporary skills and creativity and innovation that businesses love for students to have, and pairing it with a solid liberal arts tradition through a great books program. This replaces for our students their gen ed requirements. Anyone who's in the Honors Institute takes the full honors track instead. And it also gives them a second major in creativity and innovation by the time that they graduate. There were a few things that were done by the university to help this program launch. We built on strengths, we stayed on mission, and we worked on what would attract students. So for Cornerstone, what that looked like is we had a popular creativity minor that students loved. We had an honors program that existed with great faculty, but it needed some re-energizing. And we had a faculty and administration that was willing to work on innovation. So look for those things that are already strengths when you are doing innovation. We don't always have to start from scratch. We can work with what's there and come up with new things. We aimed to stay on mission and create a program that would fulfill the school's mission while also being innovative and creating something that maybe didn't exist anywhere else. And we also looked at what would attract students. So we worked on pairing what would excite students with solid educational tradition. Just one or the other might not be as powerful, but bringing the two together has created a powerful program. So let's dive into explaining what design thinking is, because it's what we used in order to create the program at Cornerstone. Design thinking is 5 different tasks that we do. The first is to do empathy and observation. This is similar to research, but it goes deeper. The second is ideation, coming up with new ideas. The third is prototyping, making whatever it is that we want to create and getting a working model. The fourth is testing, trying out that working model. And the fifth is implementing that model, making a plan, and then making it actually happen, bringing it to the world. And it's really important when you're doing design thinking to have some mindsets. They help unlock your creativity and will make your design thinking more successful. There are several that are talked about in the industry. I'm going to only focus on 4. And I think these are actually generally important when we're creative. They'll unlock us creatively and allow us to come up with better, stronger, and more ideas. The first is to have creative confidence, to trust the process and trust that you can do the process. So in design thinking, if you follow the process, it really has vast potential to be innovative, but you have to have the confidence in the process and the confidence that you are creative. And really everyone is creative. I teach this every day. And so having that confidence that we are creative is really important. The second thing is to allow ourselves to learn from failure. I tell my students that failure is a gift. Failure isn't the ending. It isn't where we've kind of arrived, when everything falls apart, but it's just where we learn. And every time we learn from failure, we create something stronger afterwards. We want to bring optimism and positivity to the process. The more positively we think, the more ideas are going to come to us. And then we want to embrace ambiguity. I liken this to embracing a world of ideas. We don't want to come to the table with preconceived notion of what our final solution is going to look like. We want to stay totally limber and open to any idea being possible. And even in the process of creating, to still looking at different avenues and just embracing the fact that we don't know what our final solution will be, even while we're working on it. So those 4 things can really help our creativity when we're doing design thinking. Let's look at design thinking specifically for honors programs. So if we look at these 5 steps, let's dive into each of them. When we're doing empathy and observation, it replaces our traditional research. We're used to doing reading, writing, and data, which are really important steps, but we can actually augment those by doing empathy. So what we want to do is first identify our entire audience and team. It can be easy when we're trying to do innovation in higher ed to sit with the administration and the faculty at most in a group of 8 to 10 in a room and come up with new ideas. But that actually limits our ideas entirely. We want to work with anyone who might be affected or involved in this process. So you want to work with parents and students and prospective students and alumni and staff and faculty and administration, maybe even faculty at other schools, maybe even businesses locally that might say this is what we're looking for in a graduating student. That's something that we did, for example. So get more than just your typical brainstormers involved in the process. You always want to listen first. So before you start jumping into those ideas or thinking that you know the answer, truly listen to everyone that you're talking to, especially your students. They will be the ones that will bring ideas to the forefront that have potential. Also, faculty, staff, parents, they'll bring really important aspects. So we always want to be in a listening mode when we're doing empathy and observation. We want to use a variety of tools, not just our usual interviews and data. We want to get visual, take photos. We want to try things out, move in spaces, take videos. We want to use data and some of the traditional methods, but pair them with new methods. And you'll find out stories, and stories are often the most important when we're doing innovation. So get beyond the traditional resource message and dig into new tools, and I'm going to have resources for you at the end of the video. And then you definitely want to work with your students. If we're going to create programs for students that they're going to love, or even just change our programs, then knowing what students are excited about is important. That doesn't mean the students control every decision, but just getting at what they're looking for can be really helpful in creating a program that'll really take off. The next step that we do is our ideation step. And to create ideas, what we traditionally do is sit in a room with a whiteboard, 8 to 10 people, maybe some markers, and just do brainstorming. But there's a whole lot more to it. The first thing we want to remember when we're doing ideation is no logic, no judgment. Any idea goes. We're not sorting ideas. We're not figuring out if they're great ideas. They can be wild and crazy ideas. You never know which idea will lead to something else that could be really useful. So any idea goes at this stage. Go beyond those basic brainstorming habits. Whiteboards and markers are great, but there's lots more that you can do. So don't just go into your typical habits, learn a few new ideation skills. I'm going to be giving you some tools at the end of this. There's all kinds of ways to come up with new ideas. So force yourself to kind of step out of that typical brainstorming, which is really just a tiny, tiny bit of a tool, and move into new ideation. And then a reminder that I always give everyone is you can never have too many ideas. So let the ideation phase take a while. Don't just get your second idea that you love and then jump on it. It may be the 50th idea that has the most potential. We typically ask our students to do a minimum of 16, but often we ask for 50 or 100 ideas when we're doing something, because it's later in the ideation process that we sometimes come up with the most original. So explore lots of ideas. Now, once you've done your ideation, you might be wondering, how do I figure out which idea to pursue? There's an important technique that we talk about in human-centered design. And that is that we want to look for what's desirable, and that we will find that out with empathy and observation. What do people want? What's feasible? We find that out when we're doing our ideation and our prototyping. What can we create? What's technically feasible? What are we able to do with the resources that we have? Where do we need different resources? And then what's viable? What will be sustainable in the long term? What will people be interested in supporting? So you can sort your ideas by looking, is it desirable, feasible, and viable? And that will help you to determine whether an idea is worth pursuing. After the ideation phase, we move into prototyping. Prototyping is where we create our initial model. That might be a mock-up that's cardboard if it's a product, or it might be a written document, it might be a drawing and a picture, kind of just depends. What you want to do here, though, is jump into making. It can be really easy to stay in the thinking and talking process, but the sooner you start making something, whatever kind of a model it might be, the sooner you'll start learning from that prototype and make adjustments. So don't get stuck in the thinking phase, dive into the making phase. Allow messy first drafts. You don't have to have everything perfect. We are used to, in the workforce, having perfect documents, but actually messy first drafts allow for much more creative potential. So your first draft of something might just be a drawing on paper or a whiteboard chart. It doesn't have to be a perfectly typed and designed document. Always work with a team. When you're prototyping, that team will notice things. So if one person's prototyping, the other might see some holes or have a new idea. So bring a few people along when you're doing your prototyping. And then come back to our mindsets. This is a great time to remember to have confidence. When you're prototyping, sometimes things will feel shaky. Sometimes things won't work out. Then we just learn from it and we take that feedback and move on. We bring positivity to our prototyping and we allow various ideas to rise up. So coming back to those mindsets throughout our process can be really important. After prototyping, we move into testing. You want to get lots of feedbacks. Identify all the stakeholders and have all of them give you feedback. Have alumni, and you could even have board members or people who are going to be donating to the school, parents, students, whoever it might be, get some feedback on your ideas. That's when you'll start to uncover holes and you'll be able to make adjustments to make the idea even stronger. Learn from your failure and adapt. You might realize in the middle of testing something that looked like a great prototype that it's not working. That's totally fine. Take what isn't working and that gives you a chance to fix it and adapt. So failure is always just a gift of learning. iterate often. That means that we make an idea and make it again and make it a little differently and make various iterations based on our testing and our feedback and our ideation. So don't be shy to just make and make and make again. We don't want to just make one version and get stuck on that document. We want to keep iterating and trying things out. And the last thing with testing, this is a good time to realize that design thinking isn't a cyclical process. We don't just simply move from red to yellow to blue to light blue to gray through the process and then we're done. Rather, we move back and forth. So in prototyping, you might realize I didn't do enough empathy. I'm going to jump back to empathy. In ideation, you might realize I'm ready to start prototyping even though I don't have all my ideas. I'm going to jump forward and then jump back. In testing, you might move all the way back to empathy, or you might move back to ideation. So we move back and forth between the steps. We don't just go through the cycle once, we go through it often as we're refining our ideas. After our testing is done, and you're probably going to prototype and test and ideate and empathize a couple times in several rounds, do it over and over again until the idea builds. And then when you finally have an idea that you really love, that has a strong prototype that's undergone its testing and refining, then you're going to move to implementation. That's when you start making a plan and you start making it reality. Even in this phase, you want to stay flexible. Bring that enthusiasm, sell your idea with excitement, but stay flexible to still make adjustments. You're going to allow change even at this step. You might be ready to implement and you might realize, actually, we still need to change a vast part of the prototype. Again, that's normal. You want to stay flexible to that. You want to team up with some realistic doers. Get those people who are really good about practical plans on your team. We want to have people who are idea people and people who are makers and doers all on the same team, because then we can come up with lots of ideas and we'll also be able to make them happen. And then you want to follow a roadmap, and I'm going to show you a couple tools where you can find details of how to write that roadmap. So those are the 5 steps of design thinking. Now that's a lot to cover. You just got a crash course in that design thinking, and ideally in the workshop we would have done some of these steps together just to try them out. But I'm going to just offer you some resources in the absence of being able to do this together. The first one is our website, designkit.org, and I am briefly going to go there for us so that you can see what they offer. Here's our designkit.org website. You will see the mindsets. There's more than I even gave you, but you'll see those. You'll see methods. This is a great place to start getting some practical tools. I'm going to talk about this inspiration, ideation, and implementation in a second. But here's things like photo journals, framing your design challenge, doing interviews, conversation starters, analogous inspiration, card sorts. These are all great tools to do in the initial empathy and observation phases. And then as we scroll down, you're going to see there's lots and lots of resources. All the way down here at the bottom is a roadmap for implementation. So even when you get to implementation, you'll have some ideas that you can look at. When we scroll to the top, you will see a resources button. And I want to highlight this right here, the Field Guide to Human-Centered Design. This was written by IDEO, and it's a great resource. It was written to work with a variety of peoples and situations, so not everything will necessarily be immediately applicable to academia, but most of the techniques are great to use, and you can get a free PDF right here. So that's designkit.org. You can get a free PDF of this Field Guide to Human-Centered Design, and it's a great place to dive in. Wanted to briefly focus on the fact that you'll have noticed that they use slightly different terms. Let's do a quick comparison. Empathy and observation, when we're doing the IDEO Field Kit version, is going to be called inspiration. The ideation, prototyping, and testing phase is all found under ideation, and then implementation is implementation. So you'll notice that's how they've organized it in their colors. It's a very similar process. We use both in the field. I just wanted to explain that so that it's helpful. So after you have gotten your design kit, I also want to recommend 2 books. The first is Sprint. It is a great way to involve yourself in some design thinking and innovation in 5 days. So it has a 5-day structure where you can over a week do some of these ideas of innovation. Creative Confidence by Kelly and Kelly is a great place to start if you want to just start thinking about how to be more creative and innovative in your processes. Last but not least, I have my email address. I would love to have you contact me with questions and thoughts, and I would love to just see if I can help you bring some innovation to your school. Wherever you're at, I hope this can give you ideas for either a brand new innovation for your honors program or even just a new unit that might be exciting within the curriculum, and I would love to help out if I can. And thanks so much for listening.